It has rained this entire afternoon, even though it was not at all forecasted. When the storm first started this afternoon, it rained 2 inches in less than an hour. I mean, it really came down hard. And thunderstorm, we looked at the radar and it appeared that there was like one tiny little bit of weather right above us and nothing else, but then a lot more developed. And it has rained the entire afternoon, just completely out of nowhere. And I'm not gonna complain about that. We have had years where we had drought and no rain, and it was very difficult to garden. Even though I don't like when my plans change, I would much rather deal with this than the opposite problem. It is definitely changing my plans though. I was planning on working outside today. It does make for a very happy garden to get a bunch of rain. Like, you can water all you want to, but something about rainfall sure does make the garden just come alive. My greenhouse is so neglected. Look at this random tomato growing up through the gravel from a dropped seed. Isn't that funny? I haven't done a video out here in a little while. The greenhouse doesn't get used very much during the summer because it is usually very, very hot in here. Right now it's 80 degrees, which is about 26 degrees Celsius, and that's in the greenhouse, and it's just slightly cooler than that outside since we just got all this rain. Actually, what I'm doing today and why I came out here was because I kind of just wanted to lay eyes on my seed starting stuff and start getting some things together to get them cleaned and washed. Oh, look at that. So sad, it's dead. Isn't that beautiful? What kind of butterfly or moth is that? Poor little guy. I've got these trays by Haas Tools that need to be cleaned out, obviously. Got a couple of those. It's just a hot mess in here, but those will be primarily what I'm using for my fall seed starting. And on my to-do list over the next few days is to get all of that stuff cleaned, washed. It's best to do it like, you know, when you're done with it, not leaving it all junked up in your greenhouse for months on end, but do as I say, not as I do. What I will do with that now is take all of those and obviously knock all the dead stuff out of them, knock all the spent soil out of them, and wash them down with hot soapy water and just get them good and clean. I don't usually go through the measures of trying to sanitize anything like that for my own personal use, but I do wash it with soapy water. And I do all of my fall seed starting inside. I will not be using the greenhouse for that because it will be far too hot in here over the rest of July and through August for seeds to germinate, because a lot of seeds begin to have struggles with germination over 90 degrees. And I'll be taking all of those clean trays as well as the bottom trays. I will be taking my heat mat, all of that stuff in my house, and I'll be setting up on some shelves in the garage a seed starting station. But I do all of my fall seed starting in the house. Now, I'm actually making this video a couple weeks before I get to that because I'm very southern. I'm in zone 7A, 7B. And so for me, I don't actually really need to start that stuff till mid to late July. In some things, I can even wait until the middle of August to start. But those of you who may be a zone or two ahead of me, if you are looking at growing some things like brassicas in a fall garden, you probably need to look into starting those now. I have an extensive video about planting a fall garden. If you want more information, I'll link that down below if you want to go further than this vlog. But what you do need to know, and just go ahead and put this on your mind, is you need to know what your estimated first frost date is. It's so crazy to be talking about this at the peak of the garden. It's so hard to start planning a fall garden when you are in the most overwhelming part of the summer garden. But if you don't plan it now, you'll very likely miss the window. And unlike the spring, where you have a very long window and you can continue to plant things, the fall garden's a little different, because if you wait too long, you won't have enough time for things to bear before the freeze comes and the hard freeze. And even if you're talking about planting frost tolerant things that can handle the temperature going below freezing, the days are going to get really short. And so it's best to really hit that optimum point and get your fall garden in so you have as much time as possible where your plants are going to grow faster. Because some things will actually live just fine and continue to grow into the cool weather, but it's really best if you can give them as much of a head start as possible going into that. Wow, look at this beautiful patch of zinnias. Isn't it crazy that this is only just a handful of seeds? That always amazes me whenever these really get going. So one thing that you must know as a gardener, and you just need to figure this out, and it's very important for planning and especially for making the most of your gardening areas, you need to know your estimated first frost date. And that does not actually go by zone. Some people think that it does. So you think, oh, I'm in zone 7A or 7B like Jess, so I can assume that I have the same frost date as her, and that's not the case. Your frost dates in the same zone can be off by a couple of weeks. It's just really based on your area, and it's also an estimate. So when you look up your first frost date, you just Google first frost date for in your city or your zip code or something like that. And basically what that is based on weather records in your area. It is the average day that the first frost comes. And it is absolutely just an estimate. It can be off by a week, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks. Much like this spring, a lot of people had an unexpected late freeze 2 or 3 weeks after their average estimated last frost date. It can go the same way in the fall, which is actually one of the reasons why I am such a huge cheerleader for the fall garden. And I just tell people, if you think you may have enough time, just go ahead and plant it. The worst case scenario is the frost comes early and you don't get a harvest. But I have had multiple instances of planting a garden and the estimated first frost being, you know, the end of October, and then we didn't get a frost until 2 weeks into November, and I harvested a lot of stuff from what I planted. So once you know your estimated first frost date, like I just Googled for myself, estimated first frost for Conway, Arkansas. Now I kind of live between Conway and another, like Little Rock. Little Rock is more southern, Conway is a little more northern from me. I err, when it comes to this, I err on the side of Conway because I would rather bank on having less time and then get surprised with more rather than bank on having more time and then get surprised with less. So I searched for Conway, which it says that the estimated first frost for Conway is October 27th. And then I just put into Google how many days from now until October 27th, and it's 110 days at the time of shooting this video. So 110 days, you can grow a lot of things in 110 days. Most everything that I grow, I could grow in 110 days. But even if you don't have 110 days left, let's say you live in a more northern area and you have like 60 days left. Well, what you would be looking at now is getting things planted that are really short season. So like you could grow possibly some green beans in 60 days. You could possibly grow some summer squash in 60 days. There are shorter and earlier varieties like that. But what you'd really be looking at for the fall garden there would be frost tolerant things. Most of what's growing in my garden right now are not frost tolerant. They're very frost tender because it's just the time of year that it is. See, the things that can handle the frost a lot of times can't handle the heat. So at this point in my garden, all of the lettuces, all the brassicas, the kales and the collards and the heading things like cabbages and broccolis, those are all done. I've already harvested what I was going to harvest, and the rest of it, they've already gone to seed. They've sent up that center stalk and started producing seeds because those are all things that can grow in freezing temperatures. They won't be killed by it. Now they might grow slow because there's not a lot of sun in the winter, but they'll still live as long as it doesn't drop down well below freezing. I've got a lot of tomato sandwiches in my future. I keep trying to walk around every time I do. It starts raining harder again. I will absolutely share my planning process with you and let you guys in on what I'm doing, but I'm kind of trying to give you this information a little earlier for those of you who are ahead of me, and also for the purpose of like ordering seeds and getting together whatever it is that you need to get together. But what I do is I start ahead of time. Cabbages, cauliflower, broccoli. I started my rutabagas in the greenhouse before the spring garden, and they did really well, so I'm planning on doing that again. I'm gonna grow a lot of rutabagas this year because I really enjoyed those, and I want to have a lot of those. I'm planning on going ahead and starting now here very soon. I'm gonna be starting seeds for Brussels sprouts. I'm gonna try to grow Brussels sprouts. All of those varieties that take a lot more time before they're harvestable, I need to go ahead and get those started here pretty soon. I like to start those like mid to end of July, so that when they are 8 weeks and they're, you know, they'll be good size, it will be towards the end of September. And at that point, it will be cooled off enough outside that I can transition those out and plant them in my garden. I am planning on starting the rutabagas early this year, some indoors, but I am also planning on direct sowing rutabagas, beets, turnips, and I'll also direct sow radishes. Those I will not direct sow outside until the very beginning of September or the end of August. Because basically if it's too hot outside and you're trying to sow root vegetables, it will force them to grow a lot of tops and go straight to growing flowers rather than storing a lot of energy in the roots. Like, you kind of need the cool weather for those to do okay. And so for me, like mid to end of July is the seed starting time inside for moving outside for all the fall stuff, and then mid to end of August is the direct sowing time, and then into September for direct sowing. Carrots are a really great thing to grow in the fall, but you kind of have to hit that right window because carrots won't germinate if it's hot outside. Now, I consider those second sowings of things, like you can grow cucumbers in the fall before it freezes, summer squash in the fall before it freezes, green beans, again, those kind of fast fruiting things. I will call those fall crops sometimes, but do know that the first frost that comes is going to kill those. So while a lot of times you can grow another round in the fall garden, if you live in a place like me that it's going to stay above freezing until the end of October into November, then you can grow those things, but it's not, those aren't technically fall garden crops necessarily. Those are still warmer weather crops, but I do sow those every year. Even now I've got empty spaces opening up in my garden, and I'll come in and do more cucumbers in the fall. You can cut suckers off of your tomato plants and root those and plant those for another wave of tomatoes in the fall. But those are warm weather crops, and when the frost does come, those are going to die. But the brassicas and all of the things that I'm talking about starting inside and moving out, those will live past the frost. Those can go below freezing, and if you can provide them some sort of cover, even if it's just like an overturned storage tub, like I showed you guys how to grow lettuce greens in a soil bag with a storage tub over it, you can take those storage tubs and just put them over your garden bed. You can use a sheet, you can get frost fabric, do a little low tunnel. Just small measures of season extension like that can go a long way when you're protecting cold hardy crops, because they're already okay if they go below freezing, and that's just adding a little bit of protection from the elements and taking them a little further with what they can withstand. Some of the things that can withstand a freeze that are great to grow in the fall, those root vegetables like carrots, beets, turnips, radishes, rutabagas, kohlrabi, arugula, lettuces. Kale is very frost hardy. The whole brassica family is. If something's in the brassica family, it can handle a frost. So that's your kales and your cabbages and your broccoli. Many of the things that I mentioned already are in the brassica family. Sweet peas, like English peas, which you can do as shelling peas or snap peas, those are good in the fall. also you can eat the shoots of those. So even if you feel like you don't have enough time to grow those until you're harvesting shelling peas, you can grow them and harvest the shoots to eat in salads or stir fries, or grow them and harvest snap peas before they produce the actual peas inside of the pods where you eat the whole pod. Those are great fall crops and they can handle pretty cool temperatures. Calendula is a flower that can go below freezing, as well as borage can handle a light freeze. And I know that I'm like in total pep talk mode right now. That's because a lot of people send me messages and I just hear the discouragement on people and even the condemnation that they take on when they feel like they're failing. I do want to encourage you, if you're struggling right now with your summer garden being overwhelming to you, like, don't write off the fall. The fall garden is seriously completely different than the summer garden. If you've never grown one, the work that is involved in the summer garden, as much as I love things like tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and all of that stuff, as much as I love this time of year and this garden, the fall garden is such a nice break after, because the pest pressure is tremendously less. It's not the heat of summer, so it's way easier to be outside working in the garden. And also the crops just aren't as demanding. I mean, with tomatoes, I'm out here tying them up regularly, pruning them, fighting the pests, and then staying on top of harvesting the fruit so that they don't split. It's just way more work intensive, whereas things like kale, you know, I mean, there's just only so much you have to do for kale. It just really grows, and that's great. Like, that's how the fall garden is. The nature of most of those crops is that if you don't get around to harvesting them one day, they'll still be fine the next day, because there's not a lot of pest pressure, especially after the freeze comes. I mean, you just don't have to worry about that much stuff. You're not having to do a lot of spraying and all of that. It really is such a nice laid back experience. It's funny because in years past I would have never ever said this, but I enjoy the fall garden just as much as the summer garden. I'm not gonna say that I like one better, because I love them both for their own reasons. They're very different experiences, but after the summer, if you told me, hey, you can grow another garden just like this in 4 months, so start planning it right now, I would be like, I don't know, man. I don't know that I've got it in me to do this all over again that soon. But the fall garden is different. So I do want to tell you that if you're feeling overwhelmed right now, like, don't miss this window. Start thinking about it. It helps too, like whenever crops start winding down and you're tearing things out, it helps to be like, okay, well, I'm just gonna leave this space and I'm gonna plant it with the fall crop next month, because it really is that soon. You're looking at rolling these things over here very soon, and it makes it make more sense that things have such a short season. It makes it a lot easier to let the summer garden go as it begins to go wild and finish cropping and dying back and all of that. So I'll share more with you guys about varieties and stuff like that as I start making those decisions. I'm not quite there yet. I'm sort of assessing my seed collection right now. I'm gonna decide what all I want to grow, what all seeds I have, figure out what I need to order. And my general idea is that I would like to have my seeds all started, specifically things that take longer, like Brussels sprouts. I'll probably start those sooner, and then I'd like all of them started by the end of July inside under grow lights. Leads me to the last question, which I've been asked this already a few times. People have asked me, okay, so you say start the seeds inside, do I need a grow light? I think that a grow light is a really, really good investment if you're trying to start seeds indoors at all. If you're trying to start more than a handful of things, lighting in a windowsill can start to become a problem because you'll end up with leggy plants. And with some things like tomatoes, it's not a huge deal if they're leggy. You can just plant them deep. But when you start talking about cabbages and broccoli, if they get super leggy in a seedling stage, it can be kind of hard for those to recover. So one small grow light that you can start your fall crops with is probably a good investment, and I think that it'll make it a much more enjoyable thing. But you do want to start those inside and here pretty soon. Find out that first frost date, count back so you know how many days it is that you're working with. I will put links to more information down below. I've got a video about fall gardening. I've got a video about root crops and just some different things like that. So if you want to like jump off into this topic, I'm always looking forward to what's next. just kind of historically in my life, I've had to slow myself down to be very present with what's actually happening, because I'm such a planner and always looking forward to the next phase. And it is a benefit in a situation like right now, because the incredible abundance of what's right in front of me could distract me from the plan of what's next. But I do have the fall garden in mind, and I wanted to make sure that I share that with you guys, and I will be walking you through that process, my process, as it goes. But I just wanted to kind of put the bug in your ear. Hey, it's time to start thinking about this. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. I bless you. Until next time.